Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have, kind of as I said before we came on screen, a really special guest, Coach Bud Foster. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you coming on, Coach. And I'm going to kind of just get right into it for a variety of sections of stuff I got for you. Um, but, I mean, I'll go first into some off the field stuff. Kind of culture, like what were you had a fantastic defense for years. What were kind of the keys to creating the culture you wanted on defense?
That's a good question. When I became the coordinator, we really had just gone to back-to-back bowl games in 93 and 94. And I had the title of co-coordinator in 95. And then 96, it became sole. But I ran the shots in 95 as well and all that. So really the last 25 years I was coordinator. But really when our staff was formed, when I became the coordinator, we always talked about, blue collar mentality, coming to work every day. And the one thing that I wanted was, let's create an identity. Let's create something for our team that we feel like in our unit that's going to separate us from our opponent. And that's where we created the lunch pail. I think that's really where the culture started, is with that. And, that thing signifies so much. I mean, the people that don't know, we've had that thing. It's for 25 years that I was a coordinator. It was always ESPN wanting to know who was going to carry the lunch pail, what's in the lunch pail, all those different things. But, when we started with my tenure there, I wanted to do something that was going to separate us, like I said, from our opponent. And that was either, and number one, the thing that we felt like we had to do. We weren't getting a bunch of 5-star recruits or 4-star. We were getting a bunch of good, hard-nosed, tough kids, but there were good football players, but really had to be achievers. And, and the only way that we could feel like we wanted to get to the level that we wanted to was we were going to have to outwork, out-prepare, out-discipline, be more committed, be more loyal, more responsible, more trustworthy. Those are the things that, really kind of what the lunch pail embodies. And that was something that the kids really bought into. And, if you were the keeper of the pail, and that was kind of the highest honor you could have at Virginia Tech. But what we did, we evaluated our guys every day. I mean, that's what we're in. I mean, the X's and O's are great. We as coaches sometimes screw the game up by trying to be too cute, and all of a sudden our players we're tying their mind up and tying their feet up with their mind. But what we really wanted to do was establish a work ethic and and a peer pressure, so to speak, that was second to none. And our guys really bought into that. We practiced like we played, and that was the thing. But we evaluated guys every day. We gave the player of the day the lunch pail, and that we wanted that to change daily. As it moved on, then, we gave it to, like, in the spring. That's what we did in spring ball. Then, and during the summer, after visiting with the strength staff, our academic people, our training staff, I gave it to a guy to start fall camp. And he was kind of maybe who would be our leader of our defense. Primarily it was going to be a senior. Usually it was. There was a couple of times we've had underclassmen. But then we evaluated guys every day with that too. But that was kind of a big honor to get that. Then as the season goes along, then the player of the game would get the lunch pail, and he'd be responsible to take it to practice, take it to, if we're playing a game, on the road, he's responsible for that. But it just established a work ethic and an expectation. And I really didn't expect it to turn into a brand, but it did. And but that's who we were, and everybody identified that with us, and they knew that every time we stepped on the field, that they were going to get our best effort, and they were going to see a hard-nosed, tough, disciplined, well-prepared unit that was going to go out and lay it on the line for minutes. And that's kind of what that whole thing established. And then after that, it kind of snowballed. And then the guys, started holding, when you start getting your best players holding other people accountable, they were your hardest workers. That's what you wanted. You're getting your best players, the most talented guys to be your hardest workers. And then that just took guys that were, talented, but, we were a developmental program. And, the young guys could see those older guys, the hard work and the commitment and the grit and the determination they had. And that just kind of snowballed and created something really, really special here that, after a while, I didn't have to do a whole lot with it. I mean, I was just kind of hold it up at times and like, hey, this is what it's all about. But, what we did over time, too, is we varied it with different things. When I first started out, we put in individual goals, we put in unit goals, and we put in team goals. And those guys, then we always had a mission statement, and I had those guys sign off on it, and if they didn't want to sign off on it, great, then transfer, because this is how we were going to do things. Yeah. But that's, and I really tried to, it wasn't what Coach Foster demanded to be successful. That's what the game demanded to be successful. And that's really kind of what we really worked on and worked hard and had the expectations. And, if you want to be a championship caliber team, a championship caliber unit, championship caliber player, you have to perform. You have to be, you have certain responsibilities and accountabilities to be that guy. And I think that's what that whole thing was about with the lunch pail. And that's really kind of set the standard for us. And then it just, like I said, it became the norm, became the standard, became the expectation. And we kind of created a monster around here. Everybody all of a sudden started thinking we go out and shut people out all the time and, and hold them to 10 points or less. And as you know, it's harder and harder to do, a lot of offense out there and a lot of explosive athletes. But half the battle is playing hard and laying it on the line for 60 minutes. And that was one thing that we were able to do. And I think that's the one thing, I had an opportunity to speak at a lot of clinics over the years and speak to a lot of coaches. And probably the biggest compliment I got was, man, your kids play so hard for you. But it goes back to those principles of the lunch pail. But more importantly about the lunch pail, I talked about loyalty and trust. Those were things that I think, are earned and are given. And I think when you have players that believe in you, trust you, know that you have their best interest at heart, they will become loyal and they will run through the wall for you. And that's really kind of what we created. It was something really, really special from a relationship standpoint. We all had coaches that, played as well and played in good programs and had a lot of success, but knew how we weren't a bunch of star recruits when we were playing. We were a bunch of, hard-nosed, tough guys ourselves. And I think that just kind of, set the standard. But that's really the foundation of what we were all about defensively is, starts with that lunch pail and that mindset of, coming to work every day. And we were going to outwork and out-prepare everybody, be more disciplined and care more for one another than anybody else. And that was kind of established the foundation for us.
Now building off that, from a staff standpoint, what do you think make great qualities not only for a defensive coordinator, which you served for the good portion of the extent of your career, but also from the people that worked underneath you as position coaches on your defense?
I think number one, as a coordinator sometimes, and particularly when you start getting younger coaches, you got to be able to coach the coaches a little bit too, and they need to know what your expectations are and how you want things done. I think the one thing that that this game is hard enough, and there's a lot of testosterone in this business, and it was all cultivated by Coach Beamer. We didn't have any egos on our staff, and that's one thing that I would recommend. It's hard enough when your livelihood depends on at our level, 17 to 22-year-olds. At your level, you're talking about anywhere from 13 to 17, 18-year-olds. Those guys, sometimes they don't know if they're coming and going in the same day, or within the same hour. But, I think there's you have to have a form of, number one, you got to be personable. You got to care. I think that's the first and foremost thing. You've got to care. in a lot of ways. You got to care about your job, your profession. You know, you've got to come to work every day with a mindset that, and I wanted guys to come in and I wanted them to think like coordinators. I really did. I wanted them to kind of think that mindset and present things to me. Now I would, you know, through experience, you know, I would, and I had the final say, but, you know, I'd want them to be able to present why and have it, you know, think that out. But I wanted that. I wanted to encourage that. I was not a guy that, you know, we communicated really, really well. And that's kind of one of our 6 keys to success, you know, in our program. Number one is great communication. But I think that's a big part of it. You know, we're all in it together. Each of us has certain strengths. And, you know, number one, you're brought in usually because of your personality and your ability to coach, recruit, communicate, you know, those type of things. But then, you know, we're all in it together. There's no reason, in my opinion, you know, there's going to be discussions. You're not always going to agree, but you're always going to have respect for one another. And that's that would be the first thing. I'd want to care, respect. And then that filters down to your players. You know, I really do see that. If your coaches are, you know, those guys identify if guys have egos, if guys are not getting along, if there's a little bit of strain in the relationships, you know, that you can see that. Kids see that. And that's the one thing we never had here. You know, I was fortunate to work for one of the best guys ever in the business, in Frank Beamer. Majority of our staff stayed together because he created a culture of a staff culture like that. We did a lot of things together off the field with our families, and you know, we encouraged that, and we also did that with our players. You know, that was the one thing we have always had a saying here, that this is home, and we really wanted to treat it that way. You know, and starting from the top, whether it was from the head coach or from the coordinators or from the coaches on down to, you know, everybody in the program. But I think just with coaches and even today, almost, and that's probably where towards the end of my tenure, I didn't have it, but you almost have to have a little bit of patience. You know, I do think kids want to be coached. They want to be coached hard. They want to have discipline in their lives. Sometimes that doesn't come as quick as you'd like it to. And I think sometimes having the patience and the poise to be able to deal with kids on a day-to-day basis, you know, and there's so many of them. Each one of them's different. Their personalities are all different. And that's the one thing, is being open in your communication, but also showing that you care. I think goes a big part of those kids believing in you, trusting you. And that goes back to that loyalty and trust. I think if they feel you'll have their best interests at heart, then, you know, I think you can get a lot of good things out of that. But you got to be open in your communication with it too.
Now, you kind of mentioned Coach Beamer there. I mean, and I'm going to kind of build off that. Who were throughout your career, your biggest influences and mentors? And then how often would you kind of reach out to them, whether they were on staff or on another staff?
Well, you know, I've had a lot of coaches over the years that influenced me. I was very fortunate. I had some great high school coaches. I played baseball, basketball, and football in high school, and my coaches were all outstanding coaches. Very disciplined, very detail oriented, very technique and fundamental driven. My whole career has been that way. But the guys that made an impact on me were my high school coaches. I had 2 basketball coaches in my time, and Lauren Wallace was one. He's in the Illinois Hall of Fame, and Roger Kraft, outstanding guys, just, you know, great men, but really got the best out of him. My high school football coach, Bill Bangle, was, and we still stay in touch. You know, he retired towards, I guess I still had about several seasons left, but he came out usually to a game every year, you know, and just I kept in touch with those guys. But those guys, as a young person, made a big impact on me. I was fortunate. I had a great family. You know, my parents were very supportive. But coaches I was a gym rat. Always my parents got me involved in athletics back when I can remember, starting Little League baseball and all that kind of stuff, you know. But coaches were always, I just didn't want to disappoint them. And those guys had a great way about them going back to the communication. I think that's where it all starts. You know, they were great teachers. They were great communicators. they really just had a good way about them. Then when I went into college, probably the guy that, and still to this day, the guy that has had the biggest impact on me is Frank Beamer. If we would have ever won a national championship, we played for one, and we played in, I think, seven or eight BCS games at the time. I think it was 8. We played in 8 BCS games, which nowadays would be the playoffs, obviously. Yeah. And I would have liked to seen what we could have done in the playoff scenario. There was a couple years we were really, really good and playing our best football at the end. But he had a big impact on me in so many ways. But going back to him, if we'd ever won a championship, he would have been put at the top of the totem pole just because of how he treated people, how ethical he was. All those guys, and that's what he's known for in the industry. Obviously, he's known for, we had Beamer ball, which was playing great special teams, great defense, those being able to score in all aspects of our offense, defense, and special teams. He was an innovator on particularly special teams, and then he was my defensive coordinator when I was at college at Murray State. But he had a big impact on me, and just how he handled people. He was a tremendous football IQ. But more importantly, he was probably at his best when things were at their worst sometimes, and that's I think that's a sign of some, of guys that look at the big picture and don't get caught up in the moment. And, you can, but, also have enough experience of how to get through that moment, whether it's good or bad, how to go to the next play. And I learned a lot through him. But, on our first staff, we had Ralph Regent was our at Murray State. Ralph Regent, who was, was a tremendous football coach, Broyles Award winner. He was our offensive coordinator, and I learned a lot of football from Ralph. Mike O'Kane went on to be the head coach at NC State, was our quarterbacks coach. Mike Clark, who's the head coach at Bridgewater College here in Virginia. He's a guy that I have the utmost respect for. Ron Zook was my position coach. Ron was at Florida and then at Illinois, and Ron had a big impact on me. There was a guy, Phil Elmation, who I took over after him as the coordinator. Phil was our coordinator from 93 and 94, and then I became the coordinator in 95. But great football coach, great mindset. Those are guys on the staff that really, had a big impact. Guys that I looked up to, though, Mickey Andrews at Florida State was a guy that I felt like if I could ever be mentioned in the same breath as Mickey Andrews, my career would mean something, and, but he's a guy that, I also had a chance to visit with over the years at different times. Kevin Steele's a good friend of mine, and we've shared a lot of ideas. Jim Heacock, like I said, is another guy. We did a lot of things, over the years. Jim Lambright, before he became the head coach at Washington, we went and visited them and brought their defense to the East Coast, and that's kind of when we started this thing with the old Up G package. He's a guy that, I had so much respect for him, and I'm just had a brain fart here a little bit, but Coach Hart was a D-line coach forever. But anyway, those are some guys that, I really looked up to and talked with a lot. As we got here more recently, Brent Venables and I became really good friends and would communicate quite a bit with one another. He would call me and, what was I doing? And then vice versa, we would get together but those are just a few guys that, had a big impact on my life. And probably the biggest ones were, to be honest with you, I learned my work ethic probably from my high school coaches from a standpoint. I was a talented guy, but not like, they are now. And I had to play because of my grit and stick to itiveness. I had to be smarter, tougher. I couldn't waste steps and all those kind of things. And I was fortunate as a young man to be able to play with coaches that's how they coached. They were very technique and fundamentally sound. And that's why we were successful, because we were a small school and we beat, a lot of bigger schools just because, we were more disciplined, all the way around. That's kind of how our teams were, I think, at Virginia Tech.
Coach, I want to swing into kind of, and we talked a little bit about this before we came on, about some off the field stuff you did, because that is what, when I talk to coaches, that's kind of what interests me readily. And the first thing I want to ask you about is what was your focus or first things that you immediately went to when scouting somebody?
I always, with all the modern technology they do now, for me as a trader, I was going to get all that information. We broke it down, and I had different guys on the staff were responsible for different areas. I really, we had our GAs and our QC guys. They would break the games down computer-wise, and that way you get all your analytics and your data and all those tendencies and things like that. But I like to break down 2 or 3 games myself by hand. I still did that, and I drew every play up. For me, it was a way to, if I write things down, I remember them a little bit more. But I also it gave me a mindset maybe of the coordinator a little bit, and and you could get a feel for their plays, his play calling, and then that's something that I would do throughout the week, would cross over with the computer breakdown. But I really we broke the games down, and we broke those down. I broke the game down, and the guys broke individual parts down, like their secondary coach did passing game and 2-minute off, 2-minute offense passing game. Or we had one coach that he really looked at outside runs and screens. And we had another coach that looked at more like the inside running game and short yardage and goal line stuff, And I always had an understanding of the whole thing, but I really like to break the game down myself, just as a complete game. And then after that, when we would watch our film, we would break it down. Now we're getting so many different personnel groupings. The college football has gotten to be a lot like the NFL. It's it's a lot of matchups. It's a lot of personnel groupings. I know high school maybe not be as much, but you get a lot of different formations and different things of that nature. But we really broke it down then by personnel and then by formations, because all of a sudden you start getting tendencies, with those teams by those personnel groupings and with those, what plays they're running out of certain formations. And that's only maybe a certain group of plays they run out of a certain personnel grouping. And then that's what we wanted to, do that with our kids, as how when we install. We would install a game plan, on day one for the whole week. We really took Tuesday as being a first and second down day, and run, play, action, pass. And then we would take Wednesday, because Monday was our off day, and so it was a big film study day. And then Wednesday would be more of a 3rd and 3 or more, and we usually either do goal line at the end of the Wednesday practice or the end of Tuesday. Just kind of depend on what our time was and that type of thing. But that's how we really installed our game plan. So the kids understood a little bit more. We really zeroed in on personnel groupings, formations, and the plays that they run. So we wanted to get to the point where we wanted to play anticipative defense as much as we wanted to play reactive defense. You know what I mean? And that means getting our kids to understand that, hey, if they're going to line up in, a 2x2 gun week, they're only going to run to the tight end side. They're only going to run these so many plays, and this is all they're going to run to the 2-man surface, is where they're going to run to the 3-man surface. So those are things, and we can, once the kids know that, then you can kind of build that plan and know what our certain calls are going to be with certain personnel groupings as opposed to other personnel groupings. And so we kind of build it that way and not overload them. And just and then on Thursday, we would really put all that together and do our, have our script day. And I was really expected us to go out and perform. We'd have about a 36-play script, and I'd want us to go out there and perform like we're going to on Saturday. But that's kind of how we built our plan and how we looked at film. Then obviously for me, along the way, I'm looking at the scatter report, from the scatter report would be our computer breakdown. So I always broke out on my game plan. It was first and 10 to start a drive and first and 10 within a drive, and that was one thing, because you would find out there, you get teams, they're going to run their nakeds or waggles or play action passes or certain screens on certain down and distance. So those are things that by calls, if I wanted to bring edge pressure, those are things you start feeling tendencies if they haven't brought it, or ran a naked and they're a big naked team, on first and 10 within, I may bring, a blitz off the edge on the first and 10 within, because of tendencies. And so a lot of that's gut feeling still too. But, I'd break my down. It'd be first and 10 to start a drive, first and 10 within. I always had second and 11 or more, second and 7 to 10, and second and 6 or less. Second and 6 or less and first and 10 to me were probably the same calls. Okay. And then really on third down is where we wanted to break down from where we were cutting off some of our pressure package a little bit, and that's like third and 3 or more. When was all pass, you know what I mean? And you get some guys at our level, hey, that they're going to be pro mentality, third and 3 or more, you're going to be 90% throwing the ball or more, and so those are just things that we really want to know, and then we want to educate that to our kids so we can play anticipating ball based, again, on down and distance situation, personnel groupings, all those kind of things. But that's kind of how we broke down our film study, but then that's how we went towards the week to present it, and that way we weren't throwing too much at them. We were able to dial in on, like for us, for example, I would emphasize 22 personnel, 21 personnel, and 12 personnel primarily on Tuesdays, you know what I mean? And then be more 11 personnel and 10 personnel, spread type one back stuff on Wednesdays, and then try to put it all together, you know what I mean? And that's so that way we can kind of just split up our game plan a little bit, and our guys can understand the look. And you might get a team that doesn't do any 21 or 20, but 12 is the new 21. And if it's just a team that's all 11 personnel and then some 10 or spread, then that's really kind of what we focus on. But still, we're going to still emphasize first and second down, and then third down, on and goal line in there on those really our two busy work days on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Now, you mentioned some stuff there, and I want to kind of build off it real quick, because you hit a lot of game planning and in there as well. How much did, when you were breaking down your opponent and building your game plan, did you adjust your blitzes based off the pass pro you were seeing? And how much did some of that cause you to change some alignment rules or alignment adjustments to alter their blocking rules?
Yeah, well, that's something all the time. We were known as a pressure package, and a pressure unit. And in my tech, we led the country in sacks and interceptions, and rush meant good coverage, and good coverage meant good rush, But and that's the one thing I really try to do is be very versatile and very, on the back end, but also very versatile with our pressure packages and stuff. And I that was the one thing that I learned from another guy I learned offense from, was a guy by the name of Gary Tranquil. Trank was on George Welsh's staff for a long time at Navy and at Virginia. He was the head coach at Navy. He was an offensive coordinator, with the Cleveland Browns there for a stretch, became with us, and really a great football coach. But he sat down with me as a young coach. This is even before this was like in 93 and 94. He sat down with me and really talked about protections. And really, that's the one thing that that's really probably what I did more than anything, even while I'm looking at when I was breaking down the film, was really studying protections, you know what I mean? And personnel, because, who's the weak link, or what are people's doing, and but the big thing was protections. And each one's a little bit different from week to week. There's different philosophies. Some are man schemes. Some are going to try to get 5 out and have hot throws. Some are going to be more of a slide protection unit. So that varies. That's something that we look at, and then we build our package from that. Now, I still have my core blitzes that I'll carry in every game, run and pass wise. But I do that because those are simple, and I know our scheme that if a team is starting to change during if they are doing, and that's what would happen against us because we were a pressure team, we would get a different look maybe from them that we didn't see in maybe previous games that we broke down. And so that's where you earn your check, is making those adjustments. And I felt like maybe that's what we were known for as well as anybody was, making adjustments and, from a defensive standpoint. But that was a big part of it is protections and, seeing what's going on at the game. I mean, it's easy to, as a coach, to watch the ball and that, but you really got to zero in on, like, I would like to look at the front and just kind of see things real quick before I looked, down the field. That's something you train your eyes and that type of thing. But that's a big, big part of what we would do and I would do particularly, and myself and our D-line coach, is really spend a lot of time looking at protections and, what are, and like I said, we can bring them from all angles, from the field, from the boundary, up the pipe. We were known for that. And we would go in each game with our core, and then we would build some off of that. Always something a little bit unique, maybe something a little different. But it was just because based off what they were trying to give us, that type of thing. And nowadays teams have gotten to the point, back in, when I first became the coordinator, you could probably blitz and they're going to turn people loose. And you don't do that. People don't do that as much, or at least their quarterbacks are trained a little bit better to get rid of the football if they're getting pressure, But I'm just hoping we can, you can turn a guy loose. That's awesome. But, it doesn't happen that often. But we're hoping we can get some one-on-one battles, and then we're going to really coach hard on, pass rush techniques, whether it's our D linemen, whether it's whoever, even our blitzers. We really work hard on pass rush fundamentals and techniques and things of that nature. But that's probably the biggest thing that we really study more than anything is going to be probably 2-minute offense. And then, in the passing game, that doesn't change a whole lot, but then more protections is so we can, I want to be able to get after that quarterback. Because as we know, if you can get into the quarterback's head and get him moving his feet or whatnot, that can make the game a lot more enjoyable from your end of it.
Now building off that, you obviously mentioned your pressures there. How much did your game planning / play calling adjust when you on like a third down situation or a obvious passing down when there was a mobile quarterback who could take off if he needed to?
Yeah, that was always a concern for me. Was having a quarterback that can create a play, or you get in certain teams that, if you're playing a pro style quarterback, you might play a little bit more man or man under or do some things like that. Playing a mobile quarterback, you can play some man or some things, but you also have to, everybody says you have a spy and all those things. And we've done that, but I'm going to do it with a linebacker. I'm not really going to do it with the defensive lineman. If we're blitzing linebackers, a lot of times we're going to do false blitzes to maybe it's like we're showing 6-man, but it's really a 4 or 5-man pressure. And we'll have, an end cop out or, somebody athletic that can, and we will talk it about with an athletic quarterback about, creating a box, or a triangle type deal that we got to keep him into, that I didn't want him to be able to step up and then, we really coached hard about our ends and run around the quarterback to create lanes and things of that nature. But yeah, obviously to have a quarterback that can run and make things happen. You see that in the NFL right now, those guys that are mobile and can keep drives alive with their feet, as well as they can still continue to look down the field, because all of a sudden somebody comes off out of coverage or whatnot, then they'll hit a guy but that's what's created things, really made things a lot more difficult, because those guys have become more talented. Obviously they're playing a lot more in space, but to me, and you're seeing that all over. I mean, Alabama and Ohio State, they've got, the best, in the business as far as at the college level. But you still see teams that have athletic quarterbacks, give those guys fits because they can keep drives alive, they can make plays, and that's, we really want to keep the pocket compressed. We want to try to keep them off the perimeter if we can, but that's the biggest thing with those guys is not allowing them to step up and then get out in space to be able to have vision to throw the football or run, so we wanted to really try to, constrict their, the box on them and keep them in there tight, not run by, create lanes and seams, in the pocket.
You mentioned coverage there, and one of my buddies wanted me to ask you is, how did you teach disguising coverages to your kids? Was it kind of like an auto check each week to know how to do this? Was there certain verbiage? Was it completely different coverage call? How did you teach that to your kids in terms of within your system?
Yeah, there's different philosophies. We always, back in the old days, we always had called up G, and we always wanted to sell pressure. And then we really by the term up, or we moved on to a little bit more 4-3 scheme. We went from an 8-man front to a little bit more 4-3. The last, she's probably 16, 17 years of my career as a coordinator. We call a bluff now, and that really, that's the term that creates the mechanism of a pressure look. We want a disguise look, that type of thing. We really didn't, on the back end, that was just something that we always really just talked about. We didn't really give a term other than if I called a bluff, I wanted to sell that we were showing like zero coverage. That's what I wanted to, that we were bringing. You didn't know where we were coming from. We had that mindset. We had DBs walking down, but you couldn't get beat by your lineman now. You had to bail out of there and do things that, and not get beat by your lineman. But on the back end, with our coverage, we were kind of known for our robber coverage and changing things up quite a bit. So our back end really, they were, those really we became more of a 4-2-5 than we were a 4-3. But those 4 or 5 guys back there, they really worked together on disguising and moving off of each other. Like our corners, we were either man deep third or we were playing those inverted halves because we played that robber coverage, and so giving them a starting point, and then they could either back out of there or disguise. Our safeties worked off of our nickel or our whip linebacker and off of our backer, particularly if teams are getting into 4 wides and stuff. So they kind of worked off of each other. We really coached up how we wanted their movements to be, and that was, I'm hoping, as guys became experienced, they just did it on their own. But that's something that we addressed in our meetings as a staff, and then what we presented to our guys. But anytime they heard the term bluff, for us, that was, we were selling that. Now, we have ways we can call what we call bogey. Bogey shows that we're going to show pressure from one side and bring it from another. There's other terms in there that we use to set things up. We had the ability to also, with our protections, that if teams, they felt like we were bringing pressure and all of a sudden they checked their protection, towards where our pressure was, we had the ability to roll it and come from the other side. But those are things that, you build in and you start from early teaching, when you're installing. So that becomes the norm. And a lot of that goes back to the kids because they hear the quarterback, and I give those kids, that's where it comes back into the kids knowing their position so well. You kind of become coaches on the field, and then all of a sudden you're playing anticipating football as opposed to reactive. And then as a coach, you can start talking to them about, okay, what's the checks and those kind of things. So when they can come off to the sideline and they, the kids know that, what was he saying? Sometimes it's hard with crowd noise, but that's going beautifully. Probably it's easier when we're on the road, because the crowd noise is not as bad when we're on the field. At home, the crowd noise is, is outstanding and hard to hear. But those are things that, we really, were were able to do and disguise, and how we would term to be able to do that.
I got two more before we get to some rapid fire questions. The first is, and this is kind of always been, there's a lot of ways you can answer this, but how did you formulate an efficient call sheet for game day? Because I mean, there's 8 billion different ways you can do it, and I've had over the years between being a special teams coordinator and a defense coordinator, then to be different sizes, different looks, what you're looking for. Everybody's a little different. So how did you formulate that to be efficient for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, I had on my call sheet, I had it down. Like I said, I had 1st and 10 to start, 1st and 10 within. I had 2nd and 11 or more, 2nd and 7 to 10, 2nd and 6 or less. On 3rd down, it was 3rd and 11 or more, 3rd and 7 to 10, 3rd and 3 to 6, and then 3rd and 2 or less. Then I had like 4th down calls. I had 2-minute calls. And then I had like our red zone and goal line, calls. And really what I did in my scenario, I always broke it down then by personnel groupings. And so I had, you had a team, let's say they were 21, didn't play, the 12 personnel's become the new 21. Not many people have a true tight end. A fullback, it becomes it's a tight end.
Yeah.
And, or multiple tight ends, and so that's the new 21 personnel. You're going to get a lot of different looks. You get one back, you get spread, that type of deal. But we really, I'd have personnel groupings, and I would zero in on what their tendencies were, and then what my calls would be. And obviously you have your base calls and that type of thing, but then I'd also have, you see what their tendencies are, and that's kind of how you create some of your run pressures. As far as some of your pass pressures, as far as what they are on 1st and or 2nd down for their play action passes, or off that. Now you get RPOs and all that's a whole nother deal, but that's kind of how I would zero in on that, and I would have it by and percentages of what's the percentage on 1st and 10 to start a drive, what's their run pass percentage, same with 1st and 10 within. Kind of zero in on that. My biggest night, to tell you the truth, I would be in the office until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesdays. That was my full day, because I went back on Wednesdays and I really looked at the passing game and the protections again, really in detail by myself. The staff would leave, I'd lock myself, and that's when I'd do up my game plan. And I do it during the course of the week some, but Wednesday night was my day to finish that 3rd down. And I really looked at that. When was man pressures? When was zone pressures? When are they doing, or are they trying to do rub routes? And when are you better off to show bluff maybe and be in coverage? Those kind of things. But I really zeroed in on that, and I'd go back and look at all the 3rd down calls. Now, let me say this. We have the ability to break down all their games. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to break down about 4 games, to be honest with you, and maybe their most recent. We were always in there if we, played them in the past, not necessarily as a breakdown, but as and I could watch the film. We might not put them in the computer breakdown, but they'd always be on the film so we could look at what they did against us. But that's really kind of how I zeroed in on that. Now, game day, because I was on the field, and in my pocket I had a card, and I had it for 1st and 2nd half, but I had 1st and 10 to start, 1st and 10 within, all those situations. And then I had my one of my guys upstairs who was doing the play chart, and he was always doing that. And then after every series, then I would say, hey, what did we get? And so he would tell me formation, personnel grouping, what was the play. So then I would write that down in between series. Like I said, for me, writing it down, I remember things. So it goes back to, okay, 1st and 10 within, maybe they were a big naked team or play action. And maybe the first time or two, they didn't do that. So all of a sudden, it's kind of like I said, I'm playing anticipating defense too. Then I'm going to bring pressure. You might zero in on hitting a guy in the mouth off of a naked or something like that, But those are just tendencies you'd feel. But I would start, and then I could communicate with the kids, though, all of a sudden, hey, they're running this play. It's a new scheme. They're running tackle trap or something like that. Then we could draw that up. It's a new play we haven't seen. But that's I would just write it down. But then I would get a feel for the coordinator himself. And then the one thing I always tried to do was be unconventional on third down. What I mean by that, just I didn't want to get into people with a routine. I would bring pressures from different angles and different spots, and I would play a variety of coverages. And that's just what we did. I think that's what made us unique, is that we were so versatile, in the back end, and that's kind of why we were kind of. I'll stand on the table when my time there as DBU, but with all the people that we've had drafted and that type of success we had. But that also, goes back to, just being versatile in the back end but also very technique and fundamental driven. We just try to disguise and just be very good that way and be able to, we were able to have some guys up front that could pressure the quarterback, or we create pressure by bringing some. And, like I said, good coverage made good rush, and good rush made good coverage. So those things were interchangeable.
And then it kind of, as an Ohio guy, I do have to ask, where did the idea to how to attack Ohio State come from? Because I think anybody in Ohio can kind of remember that game and how you pretty much drastically alter their offense for that game. Where did the idea come for that? And then how did that, from a game plan perspective, work for you?
Yeah, well, we were planning on it being Braxton Miller, and then he got hurt. And that was probably a good thing for us, because the quarterback, he went on and had a great career, but that was really he got thrown into the fire. We were pretty good on defense that year, but, we ended up we just felt like, Ohio State was known as that spread offense, but they were running the football. And we we'd kind of gotten away from the Bear defense over the years, just because of certain ways people attacked you and that type of thing. We always used to move into it, stem in and out of it a little bit. So that kind of, I really like that, and the ability to do that. But we just kind of wanted to keep the ball in the quarterback's hands and keep him in a phone booth. We wanted to get the ball off the perimeter with all the power reads and all that kind of stuff that they were doing. And so we loaded the box, and we basically played zero coverage on first and second down. And fortunately, they didn't make any adjustments. They had big splits. We weren't as big as they were, but we had some great quickness and great guys, some talented guys up front. We just, but we kept the ball off the perimeter and kept it inside the box. And, and it just worked well. We got them behind the sticks, and then we were able to dial up some pressures. I think we had 8 sacks in that game, if I remember, and it was just, and 3 picks. And it was just, it rolled a little bit. But I mean, obviously the next year they came to our place. If I had gone back, I would have gone back to our base, what we did, because they wouldn't probably expected that. But, our staff, we just kind of got talked into, let's go do this. And we had a couple of young guys and kind of zeroed in on that a little bit. Yeah. And then our quarterback got hurt, and we were up at halftime, and they came on the second half and beat us. But, but that was, we just kind of put all of our eggs in one basket. Myself, and then Torian Gray. Torian now is he was at Florida, was on our staff for 10 years, and went to the NFL and was at Florida, and now he's at South Carolina. A really good secondary coach and great player for us. But he, him and I really kind of zeroed in on this, and he had some great thoughts about, because you had to get your secondary involved to stop the run, and that meaning our safeties.
Yeah.
We put our corners out there on an island, and we took the other 9 guys and basically, just stopped the run, and had to get him, wanted to take that out of him, and then, make the quarterback beat us in the passing game. And at the time, luckily, he was inexperienced enough that we were able to fluster him here a little, here and there. I mean, I had my concerns with him running the ball, but, we really did a great job of great pressure with our front four, as well as we dialed in some really good blitz pressures as well. But that's kind of the deal. We went bare and kind of just wanted to keep the ball off the perimeter and keep it in a phone booth, so to speak. And, we tackled well and got them behind the sticks and, ended up pulling off a big upset. Obviously it spurred them on. They went on and won a national championship that year. But great football team, great program, and it was a great win for us. And and we had many of those in my time here, but that was one of the ones I remember a lot because it was just a great football team and well-coached team with great staff and great win for us.
Now, I kind of three things to kind of wrap up is first, while you coached, did you have anything, especially like in the off season or the summer before you hit that full go grind of combination of recruiting and X's and O's and preparing for opponents to get away, like hobbies or big trips or whatever?
Yeah, I bought a place we've got a little lake outside of Blacksburg. It's called Clater Lake, and I bought a place there 19 years ago, and that was kind of my little getaway. When I first bought it, it didn't have a TV or that was when cell phones just kind of kicked in. We didn't get very good cell phone reception, and I'd go down there. We'd get about 3 weeks off in the summer, so I'd go down there. We might get away for a week one place, but we'd stay the other time at the lake. And even though it's about a 35-40 minute drive, but it was being like 35 states away, because without phone, without TV, they could have assassinated the president and we wouldn't have known, So that was kind of, I fished a little bit. Even I'm not a big fisherman, but I do like to fish, and it's a lot of work, a lot more than, you watch that Bassmasters on TV. All they show is catching fish. They don't show how many hours they don't catch fish, But I did get into this wake surfing. I really like that. That's something that we've gotten into, but I still have the place. I enjoy it down there, and my grandkids and kids come down there and really and have it, have fun with it. And but that was kind of where I got my release a little bit. I really did. Probably the biggest thing, though, I will say this, that I felt like we did as a staff. I think we always met with our players on a consistent basis. And it just wasn't, it was about a lot of things. When guys would come around and visit us, like high school coaches or college coaches, they were amazed how often our players came around to see us. I know when I played, sometimes that's the last place I wanted to go was go hang out with the coaches, But our guys, we just had that kind of relationship. But we spent a lot of time with them talking about a lot of things other than football. But that's kind of where it goes back to, guys, they know you care about them and have their best interest at heart. They'll run through the wall for you. But we did that, and we always do a couple times a year. We sit down as a defensive staff and evaluate our guys individually as a group. We talk about every player. What's their strengths? What's their weakness? What's their asset? What's their liability? That's one thing, we over the years, we were always known for, changing our guys. A big safety might end up being a linebacker because we always want to put speed on the field, but, an end would move to tackle, whatever. But that's kind of what we did. We always really talked personnel a lot, just because that's when it's all said and done. Play with great effort and get the right people on the field, and in the right spot, and that's you might find a linebacker that, he's a great football player, but he's got tunnel vision. So hey, that doesn't mean he's not going to be a good linebacker, but he might be a better defensive end. So those are things that we kind of did with. I think that when guys come and talk to us, and that's kind of why it goes back to, why your kids play so hard, is we really had good heart-to-heart talks with our kids, and we didn't project them. This is where you are. And, there's some guys, obviously, you tried to stroke them and that type of thing and show what their potential is, but they had to understand you got to get there, and then through their work and that type of stuff. But I thought that's one thing that we always did as a staff that I thought was really, really good. And everybody does that, but I think we really spent a lot of detail going through each kid's strengths and weaknesses, both on the field, ability-wise, character-wise, and things off the field, like how he is in the classroom and in the community and those kind of things. Because you want people on the field that you can depend on and trust, and, you don't want to be chasing around and all that kind of stuff. Because those are the guys that are going to be the dependable ones are going to be ones that are going to, play. Now, there's some of those guys that are raw and, that are great players. You just got to kind of lasso them in, but that eventually will, it's all said and done. But that's the one thing I thought that we did a great job. And, we did that a lot right after spring ball and right after the season. Okay. So we had expectations for them to go into spring practice. We had expectations for them what to do over the summer to get better in their preparation for the fall.
Now, and one of the last two things is when you look back at some of the offenses that gave you fits, did any of them have like a common trait of why they caused you some issues over the years?
We played so many. I think the ones that, to me, that were the best offenses we played, number one, if they had a system. You know what I mean? It's a team that came in and just ran their offense. We had a lot of teams that, particularly back in the day, that would change their whole offense. It's like, oh my God. I mean, that's where you had to learn that's where you had to earn your stripes, were, by the adjustments and that type of thing. But we played so many. I had one of my former teammates ask, reach out to me now that I'm stepped away from, coaching, like, who's the top 5 guys you played against, And I was like, well, I can't say that. Let's talk about the top 5 guys at each position, And I mean, with quarterback alone, we started off with Brett Favre, and, we had Peyton Manning, we had Matt Ryan, we played Aaron Rodgers, Donovan McNabb, Russell Wilson. I mean, those are guys that we played. Oh, and that's just quarterback. And that goes back to, you got Deion Sanders and, guys like that. I mean, from my time there. So, it zeroes in. But really, to go back offensively, I always thought back in the old Big East days when we played it there, I thought Syracuse, particularly with Donovan McNabb, but they still had that same offense. George DeLeon was a great coordinator. Paul Pasqualoni was the head coach there at the time. But they had a great system. They ran a little midline option. They had great quarterbacks. I mean, Don was just one of them. They had several in our time there, and it was either us, them, or Miami, that were kind of in the hunt. West Virginia every now and again, BC every now and again. But, those were guys that, I thought Syracuse did as good a job as anybody. And then when Rich Rodriguez, he was a guy that really kind of got that spread offense going. And, he was at West Virginia and was at Clemson at time too. And we played those guys. But they had a system, and that was a thing. Dave Cutcliffe, who's at Duke and does a great job, and obviously his track record speaks for itself. He's a guy I have the utmost respect for as well. But, those guys run their offense. They don't change. They might put a little ring here or there, but it's not going to be a wholesale change. I mean, not that, our rivals UVA, and I've got a lot of respect for Al Groh, but I mean, about 3 years in a row, he ran a whole different offense than what we saw, the previous 3 or 4 weeks. But also, by that same token, it's kind of what message are you sending to your players? You tell your players, okay, hey, we just do what we do and we execute, we'll beat them. I think if you come out and you do a lot of changing and do a lot of different things, a lot of new things because you feel like that's what you have to do to beat somebody, then I think deep down the message to your kids is, hey, we're not good enough. And that's the one thing we just, when we did our preparation in fall camp, our first couple of weeks, we were preparing for a season. It wasn't the first game, so our installation was, we're preparing for a season. So if we have to make an adjustment 6 weeks down the road, we've already probably seen, ran this defense that I want to make the adjustment to, or the scheme or the technique that they'll need to play or something that we're going to, that type of thing. But, I'd say, I always had the utmost respect. I thought Donovan McNabb and that group that they were just so versatile and so athletic. And, I thought they were, and with the option game, the midline game, and then a pro style, they were probably the hardest one. And besides then the quarterback being a threat to run and throw, he was one of the early kind of dual threat guys that we played that, just was a dynamic football player.
And then the last question I'm going to ask you, just in part because I'm a Metallica fan, adding Enter the Sandman to y'all's entrance, what did that help for your overall team culture while you were there?
Yeah, that was pretty cool, man. I don't even know when that started, how many years we've been doing it. I really don't. But I've always been on the field. A couple of years ago, this what kind of drove me out of business here recently was, I had a heart episode and kind of scared me and scared everybody. And I coached the last few games of the season in 2018 from the press box. Yeah. And that was the first time I was, hang on, excuse me, we've got the dogs barking in the background.
You're good, Coach.
But that was the first time I was able to see it from out, because I was always in the tunnel. We got a tunnel that comes out, onto the field, and you can hear it, and the crowd's jumping, and it makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You're so excited. But I was able to see it, and it was just such a cool experience and such a cool visual. And I could just, it was a thrill to run on the field, and I can only imagine with those guys playing, the adrenaline and things that they have. But it's such a cool entrance, such a cool song, and I appreciate that Metallica's embraced that with us, and it's one of the great entrances in all of college football and all the sports, in my opinion.
Well, coaches, that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast with Coach Foster. Please, his Twitter will be down below, so you can follow him there. And then, as normal, all the tags. So if there's any specific portion you want to watch this or listen to this, depending on how you're viewing this, you can click on and go back there. Thank you again, coaches. And this was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.